right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. I've got a couple of interesting stories for you guys today. The first story I want to talk about today, let's talk about classic physique at the Arnold Classic, specifically Terrence Ruffin. Terrence, as you guys know, who just had a little bit of a battle with the virus, posted this story, which is really the first real physique update that we've seen of Terrence. He says, filled back out after the CV, and now I'm working on conditioning. So to me, looking at this update and knowing that this is post-recovery from being sick, I think Terrence looks further along at this point in his prep than he looked when he was this far out from the Arnold. So I think that's a good thing, especially when you take into consideration he was just sick. And look, I'm going to call this one early. I think that Terrence is going to be the guy that wins the Arnold. I think, honestly, I don't think Terrence got enough credit after last year's Olympia, 2021. I think personally he pushed Chris a lot harder than people thought he was going to. I think the gap between first and second this year, even though it was the exact same top three as we saw in 2020, I think the gap between first and second was closed a little bit this year. And I was even starting to see that in the comment section a little bit, some people even saying they thought that Terrence should have won, and Chris Bumstead had been kind of the golden boy up until this point. So I'm going to go ahead and call it early that I think Terrence is going to win the Arnold again, and I think he's going to be pushing Chris again at the Olympia, but I think this year the big change at the Arnold is not going to be Terrence. I think it's going to be who's pushing Terrence, because at the Olympia, it was Bjornsson that was right behind Terrence in third place. I think this guy right here, Ramon Dino, or Dino, it's like dinosaur, but I think this is going to be the guy that is going to be the next big thing. I think he's going to be the next up-and-comer as far as guys that we see pushing some of the top guys in Classic. He was just fifth at the Olympia behind Urs Kalsinski, who is also in this lineup. But I think this is going to be the show where he really breaks out. The last show that he did, that Expo Pro Super Show, he looked fantastic. All the physique updates that he's posted leading into this Arnold Classic, he looks fantastic. I think this is going to be a big momentum show for him where he leapfrogs Bjornsson and passes up Urs, who beat him at the Olympia. And I really think there's a good chance that we see a call-out of just Terrence and Ramon. Now, I did say that I don't think that Bjornsson will ever push Chris again or win another title. I think Bjornsson's era is over, but that's not to say that Chris can't be pushed, especially by some of these new guys, some of these young up-and-comers. Ramon Dino is one of them, but I also think that Marcelo De Angelis, a.k.a. Horse MD, is another one. I think a lot of these new-coming Brazilian classic physique guys, that is, if Horse MD decides to go with classic instead of bodybuilding with his pro card. But I really think these guys are the future. That being said, I don't think Chris is going to lose the Olympia this year. I don't think he's going to lose maybe for the next couple of years. I do think he will probably go on to get at least 5 titles, and I don't think this will be the year that he's beaten. But as much as people like to call me a Bumstead fanboy, I see a lot of really, really good talent coming up in classic physique right now that I think it would be foolish to deny some of these young guys the potential that they have to one day knock out the champ. I think it's really cool to see how far the classic division has come and how good some of these guys are and how perfect of a fit some of these physiques are for that category. But let me know in the comments below, who are you most excited for in classic physique as far as young guys or an up-and-comer or newly turned pro? Which guy do you think is going to have the brightest future in the sport? Now, I also want to mention that there was a pro competition this past weekend, but they didn't have men's open. They had 212, and the 212 champion at this past weekend's Saudi Classic was none other than Ahmad Ashkanani. Now, I believe he was already qualified for the 212 Olympia in 2022, but he's certainly qualified now. And even though lately it doesn't seem like Ahmad is as big of a threat at the 212 Olympia, in 16 and 17, he was runner-up both those years, giving Flex Lewis a pretty significant run for his money. Now, this year, well, last year, 2021 at the 212 Olympia, he was still top 6. He was still first call-out. He placed 6th there. Maybe in the future he will be in that conversation for a top 2 spot again. But I do think people forget how good of a 212 competitor he was. And he even won the Arnold Classic back in, I guess it was 2017 he won the Arnold, the 212 category there. And speaking of the Arnold Classic, they are the sponsor of today's video.
I think that every bodybuilder has something unique, especially the bodybuilders today. I mean, wow, they are big.
Now, next up in news, not as serious or as important of a story, but Michal Krizo put up a little joking post on Instagram, joking about the vacuum pose. Obviously, Michal Krizo is not known necessarily for his aesthetics, but more so for the fact that he's a mass monster, so he kind of poked some fun at the idea of the vacuum pose. And I was actually thinking about this. It made me think when I saw this post. It's still up for conversation in men's open bodybuilding, but remember when Classic Physique, the first couple years, there were several guys that didn't hit the vacuum pose, and we had this whole conversation of should the vacuum pose be mandatory, and how important the vacuum pose is in Classic Physique specifically. And I was thinking about that when I saw Krizo post this. Man, we haven't talked about the vacuum pose in a while on this channel, and the reason for that is really now, is there anybody in Classic Physique who doesn't hit the vacuum pose? Even Bjornsson hits it now. He hit it at this past Olympia. Now, it's still occasionally a conversation in men's open because it's always cool when we see a men's open guy that's able to do it. But in Classic Physique, it used to really be a debate whether or not it was important to do a vacuum pose in Classic Physique. And now, I don't think I can think of a single Classic Physique guy that's in the top of the lineup at the Olympia that's not hitting a vacuum pose. And think about the top 10. Chris Bumstead 1, Ruff Diesel in 2nd, Bjornsson in 3rd, Urs Kausinski in 4th, Ramon Roca, a.k.a. Ramon Dino, in 5th. In 6th place, Alex Cambronero, Mike Summerfield 7th, Fabian Meyer 8th, Brian Jones in 9th, and Robert Timms in 10th. Every single one of those guys has a fantastic vacuum pose, and they all hit the vacuum pose on the Olympia. And that was kind of part of the conversation with Bjornsson is I thought he had a really good vacuum pose. I don't know why he didn't use it against Chris. When Bjornsson was winning the Olympias that Chris was runner-up, Chris was hitting it and Bjornsson wasn't. That was kind of the whole conversation. It's just interesting how that division has evolved. And now I don't even think it's up for discussion, the vacuum pose, even though it's not mandatory. I think it's one of the most important elements of these posing routines in Classic Physique. At this point, I really can't imagine Classic without the vacuum. Now, next up in the news, Hafthor Bjornsson. We see a little bit of a boxing update from Hafthor, really just kind of a power punch of him punching a smaller guy, just showing off how powerful and big Thor is. I mean, it's kind of a classic video tactic here. Take a guy that's significantly smaller than Thor so that the punch looks that much more brutal when Thor does it. But I still think it's good promo for the fight, even though that's not at all how it's going to look with Thor punching a guy the size of Eddie Hall, even though Eddie Hall is still significantly shorter than Hafthor, I think by 7 inches or something. And actually, a lot of people still ask me if that fight's even still happening. The answer to that question is yes. I do know it's still happening. I know when. I just can't tell you when. But it is still happening, and it's happening in 2022. A lot of people think the fight's off. Eddie tore his bicep, and they had to postpone it. Some people think it's never going to happen. It will happen. Don't worry. We will see Eddie versus Thor. So people say, why is he still even posting promo for this? Why is he still building it up? It's happening. Trust me. And to be honest, in the beginning, I thought for sure Eddie would win. That would have been my prediction to win when this fight was first announced. Now I'm actually honestly leaning towards Hafthor because I kind of want to place a bet on this fight. And honestly, now I'm kind of leaning towards betting on Hafthor. But let me know in the comment section down below, who would you guys bet on in the Eddie versus Thor fight? And finally, I will give you guys 3 stories in one. I'll give you guys 3 7-week out physique updates from all 3 of kind of my biggest wild cards at this year's 2022 Arnold Classic. Justin Rodriguez on the left. In the center, of course, you've got Brett Wilkin. And on the right, you've got Samson Dowda. These were all roughly 7 weeks out updates from this past week of each of those guys. And these 3 guys in particular, I think all of them are guys that not as many people are talking about. They're not the biggest names going into this Arnold Classic. You got a lot of top caliber Olympians, Olympia champions, by the way. Brandon Curry is in this lineup. Arnold Classic champions in this lineup. You've got a lot of really elite guys here. So these names like Brett, Justin, and Samson, while they're not as well known, I think these guys are just as dangerous as some of these established dominant pros that are in this lineup. But I think without question, one of these 3 wild card guys is going to find themselves in the top 6 at the Arnold Classic. Let me know in the comments below which one of these 3 you think will place the highest at the Arnold. And do you think there's a potential that one of them wins the Arnold? Now, another one of my wild cards is, of course, Rafael Brandao. But I haven't really seen any recent updates from him. Let me know in the comments, actually, who's your wild card going into the Arnold? We know all these big names that are in the lineup, but who's the guy that you follow that might not be talked about as much? There might not be videos about, maybe even has not won a recent show. But which guy is kind of your sleeper at this year's Arnold Classic? Let me know in the comment section below. That's going to wrap it up for the video today, guys. I hope you did, in fact, enjoy it. Please make sure to give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. That helps out a lot. It gets us into the algorithm. Now that dislikes can't be shown because of YouTube, the likes are more important than ever. So make sure you like the video, leave a comment, subscribe, hit that bell notification. I appreciate and love every single one of you guys. Thank you for stopping by. Nick Strength and Power signing out.